it's back to you.
Oh, all right. I think the meeting is now being recorded. Hope that's all right with everyone. Nasia, would you mind clicking next on the slides, please? This is the moment when the slides will not work. Oh, here we go. All right, I think next one as well. Excellent. Thank you so much. So to set the context, I guess, for today and for the purpose of this particular session, we will be looking at how we can support organizations in the voluntary sector and our partners to develop organizational resilience. The definition of resilience that we have considered in our work so far, so again, as part of our resilience fund, but also as part of Cranfield's work, is that of the Cranfield University from 2017. So that is the improved ability to anticipate, prepare for, respond, and adapt to incremental change and sudden disruptions in order to survive and prosper. Next slide, please. And even though we will not be going beyond that sort of universe of organizational resilience, there are two other dimensions that I would really want to mention, and that is personal resilience and systemic resilience. And this is something that we are incredibly interested in, especially how these, all three of these dimensions, I guess, interact and influence each other, how personal resilience feeds into organizational resilience and vice versa, but also how organizational resilience feeds into systemic resilience and vice versa. Next slide, please. Right, and then going one step further, I just wanted to highlight some of the building blocks that support support the development of organizational resilience. And there is no single success formula, and there are no universal building blocks. But it would be really, I guess, remiss of me today to not mention some of the work that's already been done in the sector. You know, there's some really big players that have been working on this for a very long time, like CAF. Lloyds Bank Foundation, City Bridge Foundation. There's quite a few of them that are already sort of looking at this, but we have been working to, I guess, identify what are those key building blocks that support building organizational resilience. And we have used these building blocks in our work with the Resilience Fund, and all our grants cover one or more of these building blocks. So for example, we have funded organizations that have brought in fundraisers to support their financial sustainability function, but at the same time, by bringing those people on board, they've been able to, I guess, safeguard some of the CEO's time, for example, that was previously doing fundraising to cover a different building block. So, for example, effective leadership or that strong strategic planning. I'm going to hand over to Amanda now, so she will explain in a bit more detail from experience of the Cranfield Trust why each of these building blocks is so important in building resilience. Amanda, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So when we're thinking, oh, sorry, Nasia, can we go back? That's perfect, thank you. When we're thinking about the different elements of organisation resilience, we look really carefully at different aspects, and they're well described in these building blocks. In terms of having a clear mission and strong strategic planning, we think that clarity around future plans is really important. Most of the organisations we work with have a very strong sense of purpose, but they don't always have an articulated plan. And having a strong plan really does help to give that focus and direction, obviously, but the process of planning is almost as important as the plan itself, bringing people together and making sure that everybody is aligned around the direction of the organisation. And I think it's especially important to have that strong plan in this uncertain environment. At the moment of our consultancy work, about half our projects are helping people to confirm their strategy and to develop strong business plans. On financial sustainability, we try and look fairly widely at this. I think it's hard to know really what we mean by sustainable across the board, and it's very organisation specific. But we feel that cash flows are absolutely vital, and it's looking at unrestricted reserves is a bit of a blunt instrument. So just helping organisations to think about their cash flow forecasts and not just focus on budget forecasts is really, really essential. I think forecasting overall is an area where organisations are less strong. And so that's something we look for and try and help organisations to develop well. Effective leadership is again, hard to define. I think it's hard to have resilient organizations without resilient people. And we're all seeing high levels of stress and in some cases burnout. In terms of chief executives and managers, but we really focus on boards as well as leaders and managers. And I think that unless boards understand their roles as trustees and are well aligned with the management of the organisation, it can create a lot of extra stress and burden on chief executives. Having operations that are fit for purpose that's also something that's really specific to each organisation. But we're seeing so much overstretch that I think it's very important for people to be realistic about what they can deliver and to make sure that they are focusing on their processes and operating in as lean a way as possible. People and culture, I'm sure you know the expression culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's hard for leaders to focus on culture at a time when they're really stretched and being drawn into operational activities often. But investing time in culture and in supporting people is really essential. And we're all very familiar with the workforce issues of recruitment and retention of staff in the sector. And so I think that culture is an area where it's hard to make time to focus, and it is quite intangible, but it's really, really important, particularly in the current stressful circumstances. So, Cristina, back to you, and Nasia, next slide, please.
Great, thank you so much. So, before I guess we move to reflections and the early learnings of our resilience fund, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the fund so that we're all on the same page. So I guess in total, let me start from the beginning. The resilience fund came about as a probably very natural continuation of what we used to call a capacity building fund. And that was exactly what it says on the tin, supporting organizations to build capacity. Now in 2021, what am I saying? In 2021, following the pandemic, we realized there was a real need, especially for our current partners, to invest in that, background function, that infrastructure. So we decided to invest a total of £900,000 over 4 years in supporting organizations to build resilience. So far, we have worked with about 20 partners, so 10 each year since we've launched the program, and they received £30,000 in grants over 2 years to implement their chosen projects. I guess in recognition of the fact that the cost of living crisis has really affected the voluntary sector, but also to underscore the importance of this particular approach of building resilience, we have made a decision to increase this year's grant. So we are currently in the process of appointing our next partners, and each of them, up to 6, will receive £60,000 over 2 years. Alongside the funding, we've also implemented a fairly structured learning program in partnership with the Social Innovation Exchange. So they are our learning partners on the program. And the learning program basically consists of 2 half-day sessions over the course of every year for each cohort. And those sessions, one of them will cover fundamentals of building resilience. So we allow our partners to spend time with resilience and each other. And then the other topic is chosen by our partners, whatever they feel like is most needed at the time. We have already delivered sessions on governance and financial resilience, and we're planning more sessions on impact and communications. But I wanted to sort of stop quickly here in terms of highlighting the role of the Social Innovation Exchange, because they have been really instrumental in supporting us to really understand our role really as funders in this space and where we can add value. But also they have supported our partners to understand what resilience means to them. And we have been able to, I guess, separate that part of supporting each partner on their wider resilience journey and what it means for each organization from the delivery of their actual projects. And that way we have been able, I guess, to look at learnings from more than one perspective. We have also seen early success indicators that speak about the progress each organization is making. So just with the caveat that our data is just 1 year in, so we are currently in the process of gathering more data. But 1 year in, the organizations that were working towards increasing their financial sustainability, for example, have seen a 50% increase in the area. And similarly, 41% have seen improvement in effective leadership, and 31% have seen improvement in operational resilience. And I'm really hoping that in the next couple of months, and especially over the summer and going into autumn, we'll be able to share a bit more data in terms of success and progress. Next slide, please. I think this is probably the most important part of my presentation, is around those early learnings that we have seen as funders. We have seen our first cohort finish their program in April, and that has really given us the opportunity to assess, I guess, how we've been doing work in the past 2 years. And I just wanted to say, and I think, you know, it goes really beyond saying that this kind of funding, supporting organizations to build that culture of resilience, and whether you call it, you know, resilience or capacity building, infrastructure support, whatever you call it as funders or as organizations, it is still very much needed. And I'm sure you know this from your own experience, but organizations are operating in a very, very difficult environment. And this kind of funding can really tip the balance, I guess, in favor of our partners. But to move on to our reflections, I guess one of our commitments as funders, in this particular space is that we work in partnership with expert charities, and we try to build trust-based relationships that are rooted in, you know, openness and flexibility, adaptability, and proportionality. And we have employed this particular approach consistently across the board with every partner that we bring into our portfolio and our existing partners. And I think because of this approach, and that's something that we share with our learning partner, the Social Innovation Exchange, we have been really able to build what we call a brave space, or as opposed to a safe space. But we call the brave space, I guess, an opportunity for our partners to come together and feel like they could share their challenges without fear of judgment from us as funders, but also from their peers. And I think, you know, whenever we work as funders with our partners to support building resilience, it is a very vulnerable space. We are actually asking our partners to come to the table, exposing, you know, their deepest fear, the deepest challenges, and being able to have this particular space where that was facilitated by the Social Innovation Exchange. And I feel like it has really ensured that organizations were able to prioritize this kind of work, were able to carve time and space to come together and spend time with resilience and with each other as well. And I think also what is really critical in creating that community of organizations that are working on understanding resilience building is that developing that culture of resilience, it is a difficult, challenging, and obviously non-linear journey. And I think that is something that we have been challenged on from the very beginning. In fact, you know, some of the organizations that we work with have made very little progress or have maintained their status quo. And that is, you know, completely normal, and is something that we're trying to normalize. And as I said, you know, the journey, because we're trying to create this culture shift within the organization, it is a long-term endeavor, and it is, you know, a challenging and complicated at times journey. Which kind of, you might be thinking right about now, how do you know that this approach is successful, and how do you know that you're making a difference? And believe me, our trustees have asked us the same and have challenged us on this from the very start. And again, I'll probably shout out to our learning partner, the Social Innovation Exchange, and highlight the importance of having someone external coming on board and supporting the journey. And for us as funders, their support has meant that we have been able to be really reflective about how we approach funding resilience, I guess without finding ourselves into that echo chamber. We've been able to develop best practice together, or start developing best practice. We've tried to learn from the different approaches that we've taken with how we engage organizations on this journey, and how we even put the fund out there whenever we're recruiting. And most importantly, we're beginning to find answers to questions like where in this journey of resilience building we want to intervene, where in this particular timeline we feel like we can add most value, and whether resilience building should actually be a core part of our activities rather than just a program or an add-on to our current offering. We also have a self-assessment tool that we have developed that is available to our partners, and they are able to track their progress. And this has been well received, and we are now in the process of sort of looking at how we can make it more user-friendly and how we can support organizations to use it beyond the life of this particular grant. And finally, I just wanted to say that we really can't do this alone. And it is, I think, vital that as funders, we aim to build an ecosystem of support that for organizations to rely on, so that when one avenue or one stream of funding ends, there are options to continue investing in building resilience. Obviously, we continue that improving our support for our partners, but also developing learning for the sector. And I think that is probably key. One of the key messages that we want to highlight in our presentation today. I think next slide for us now, Nasia, and I'll go back to Amanda, that will cover a bit more on what are they seeing in their work with the organizations on their journey to resilience. So back to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Cristina. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we work with organizations in terms of developing resilience and the kind of issues and challenges that we're seeing in the organizations that we support. So we do at Cranfield Trust, we do a lot of work with funders. We often work in partnership, providing support alongside funding. And our support is very much geared to addressing the bespoke, or it's bespoke and geared to addressing the individual problems of organizations. So we have three areas of service. Services geared to organizations are consultancy and telephone advice. So we provide consultancy projects on a range of issues, all geared to organization management. About half our projects every year are business plans, as I mentioned before. So that's a key area for us. Sometimes people come to us to ask for business planning support, but sometimes if we're talking to somebody and they've asked for something else and they don't have a business plan in place, we often suggest starting with that because it's a great way of taking a look across an organization and really helping people to align their views and align their sense of direction. So our consultancy covers all kinds of things. Our telephone advice is often focused on governance and financial management questions. That's really a service for people who don't need a full consultancy project, but who do need some support with a particular issue. For leaders, we provide mentoring, and that's something that has really grown in demand during and since the pandemic. And last year we started about 120 new mentoring assignments. And we also provide a peer support group. So organization chief executives can come together in a facilitated group to discuss their challenges. Alongside that, we also provide a lot of webinars on management topics, and we have a range of resources on our website so people can find some guidance and some information as and when they need it. And we try and cover, in our webinars, we cover a lot of essential management issues. And then we also have some talks which are more sort of fresh thinking from practitioners and business school academics. So we've tried to create a range of types of support that will help people to address their management challenges in whatever way is most appropriate to them. And all our services are delivered by volunteers. So we work with a register of 1,400 volunteers around the country who are managed and supported, managed and supported by our staff team of regional managers and coordinators. So what we tend to see when people first come to us, particularly around the sort of the mission and the plan and how far they have how far they've got in articulating their plans, is that they have a really strong sense of purpose, but they haven't always sort of fleshed that out into a strong plan, and particularly their plans don't always have very clear and realistic resource planning. So that's something that we do a lot of in terms of helping to really get those details about resource requirements thought through, and also to help people think through different scenarios and what might happen. It's a great activity in terms of aligning people together and creating that sense of shared direction, particularly between boards and leaders and managers. So bringing together everybody as part of the planning process, I think the process is almost as important as the plan itself. We work a lot on financial sustainability, often as part of a business plan, but I think it's really important for us at the moment, helping organisations to think through their different scenarios. We don't see organisations always taking a strong enough approach to their plan Bs. People tend to make quite light touch sort of plan B arrangements. They think about cutting costs a little bit, but they're not always thinking radically enough in terms of what might happen. It can be, difficult to look over the edge of the abyss if you're worried about the future, but it's much better to do that. And that also does create a sense of more confidence in terms of having thought through the worst things that can happen and being ready to face them if they do. So we really try and encourage people to think seriously about their fallback options and not to be too gentle with that. There's a big push for people to have more diverse sources of income, and we completely support that, but it can be double-edged. We do sometimes see organisations that have got so many different sources of income that it creates a really heavy burden of reporting. And so, applying for small grants or creating relationships which generate small amounts of income can be really demanding in terms of management time and reporting time. So it's important to get the right balance of things there. We have much lower demand for projects around financial management than in other areas. It's something that we'd like to do much more of because we feel that forecasting is especially important in this climate. But I think people tend to often feel that if they've got some financial information or a reasonable amount of financial reporting, then they've kind of addressed the financial management issue. We feel that it's never too soon to think about cutting costs, even if you're not in a position where you need to. And the more you think about financial information, the better. So it's rare for us to find an organisation that we feel has all the sort of financial management tools in place. A lot of our business plans, of course, involve financial forecasting and thinking about financial management, but we do get a much lower take-up of purely financial activities. Around sort of effective leadership, it's hard to have a resilient organisation if you don't have resilient people. And we have found tremendous interest in our mentoring activities. Our volunteers act as mentors, and I think just having somebody to support you as a leader and with whom you can discuss a range of issues is really effective. It's an effective way of using time, and it's really supportive personally and helps people feel more confident and to rehearse decisions, to sort of test different scenarios and to practice conversations that might need to be had with boards or other colleagues. So that's something that we're doing a lot of, and the peer groups that we offer are also very popular, where leaders can come together and share their challenges with each other, providing mutual support and feeling less alone and less isolated in the issues that they're dealing with. So we place a lot of importance on working with leaders, but very much in the context of their organisation. So it's about their role and how they're operating within their role as leader. Operations. Most of our organisations are under-resourced in terms of their service delivery, and it's very common for us to see leaders drawn into service delivery, and obviously that creates pressure on them in terms of not being able to focus on more strategic thinking, or they are frequently drawn into fundraising. We try to encourage people not to depend on sort of overstretched forecasts. So with an organisation that is struggling to meet demand for its services, as so many are, getting into a habit of people working extra time or giving extra effort to things is not realistic. So trying to make sure that people are not planning on that basis is really important. And I think that with most of the organisations we support, 80% of them have income under 1 million and 60% have income under 500,000. There's no role overlap or very little role overlap. So that creates vulnerabilities in the organisation. And if somebody is away or on sick leave, which is quite common at the moment, there's a high proportion of people with absence or sickness and health problems. It can mean that, again, the chief executive or a senior manager is drawn into filling those gaps for absent colleagues. So trying to create some sense of understanding between people's different roles is really important in helping cover for them in absence, because that's a real high risk element for many organisations. People and culture, I think I mentioned before that, you know, focusing on culture is difficult when everybody is flat out busy. But I think it's a vital thing for leaders to be thinking about. It's a time when people need care, and feeling strong and together as a team couldn't be more important. So going through that kind of planning process is really important in consulting everybody and making them feel part of the organisation's future. But a focus on culture, I think, really creates a sense of stability in the organisation, and good internal communications and sharing information and knowledge is really critical at a time of stress. So I think, you know, we see a lot of people who are great leaders who are heavily distracted by the day-to-day demands of their organisations, and helping them to carve out time to focus on their people and on the culture of the organisation. It couldn't be more important. So those are some of the things that we're seeing in our work, and we're working with a lot of groups of organisations, particularly cohorts in particular sectors. We're doing a lot of work with refugee and migrant organisations and rape and sexual violence organisations, and we also work regionally. So in different parts of the country, we work with individual organisations and groups of charities to support them. So we are hoping to see changes in the trends that of the challenges that our charity clients are facing. We don't think change is going to come anytime soon, unfortunately, but we do see that helping people to take a holistic approach to their organisations and to think across the board about what's happening, and also to focus on the future, both in terms of strategic thinking and in more detail in terms of financial forecasts and scenarios, really helps people to feel a bit more confident and to feel that they're prepared for whatever the future brings. So, Cristina, I'm going to go back to you. And
thank you, Amanda.
Nasia.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That has been fantastic. So last but not least, I will hand over to Sarah Emery at Berkshire Youth. And just a few words about Berkshire Youth. They've joined the first cohort of partners for the Resilience Fund, and she will share a few of their reflections on their journey so far. Sarah, over to you. I'm not sure whether we can take down the slides now so you can all see Sarah rather than look at her name.
I don't know that anyone needs to see my face that full on, Cristina. That feels a bit much. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. As Cristina said, I'm Sarah Emery. I am the Chief Exec at Berkshire Youth. Berkshire Youth, I guess, has been on a real journey. As Cristina said, we were one of the first cohort for the Resilience Fund, and it really was a great journey for us to go on in terms of us understanding kind of how we maybe needed to move to the next chapter. So for a bit of history, Berkshire Youth is nearly 85 years old. For the 25 years before I'd taken over, we had the same chair and the same chief exec. The organisation had moved from a £60,000 organisation to circa £1 million organisation. And if I'm brutally honest, which I think I probably quite was in my application with Berkeley, was that not a lot in terms of governance had changed in that period of time in terms of structures and processes. And sort of coming into the organisation at that point, we knew our chair was looking to retire, we knew our chief exec was looking to retire, and obviously a huge wealth of experience was going from the organisation, and concerns around how that works in a sector that is very people-led, very people-driven, and how we would kind of master that change. I think I probably wouldn't be the only voluntary sector organisation that says we were probably too guilty of being kind of, I guess, head down and a little slave to our funders. You know, the requirements of our funding obligations tend to become your priority for kind of day-to-day work. And I think what the resilience fund enabled us to do was to kind of almost stop check ourselves and buy some time and capacity and headspace that we all very much need to have some of these conversations reflectively, both within our teams, but also we use outside agencies to come in and have some of those conversations with us. So we partnered with the National Youth Agency, who came and did a bit of work with our trustees, with our staff teams, and workshop with our senior staff to look at lots of the areas that we talked about, our mission and our strategy, looking at our financial resilience, looking at how our leadership, both at board level and senior staff level, was structured, and how were our operations kind of fit for purpose. And just being able to have, I think, like we've talked about, that safe space to have some of those conversations. I think our reflection was our board was full of some really lovely, well-meaning people, but maybe not driving the organisation forward as it needed to, providing either strategic direction or that kind of critical challenge that the organisation needed. But I'm really grateful that they committed to the process. We are sort of 18 months, 2 years into that process. We have a new expanded board of trustee. We only have 3 trustees who remain. And we've brought on a lot of new trustees, and some of those trustees have sort of transitioned over time as we've brought new expertise on board. It was really good for us to be able to kind of be reflective of where we needed to be, and not just having well-meaning people, but having people who shared our purpose, shared our vision, but also could bring skills and expertise to the table. We've realigned our staffing structures and all of those other bits and pieces. I think there's someone on the call from Sovereign. I was talking at a Sovereign Partners Group meeting earlier this year, and I used the analogy of buckaroo to kind of describe the situation that I think many organisations like ourselves find ourselves in. I have 3 children, and they're not the kindest when we play buckaroo. So out we get the box. Everyone loves the game, but I, as a charity, feel a little bit like the donkey, because everyone's really excited about all the other stuff around the outside. We have arguments over who has the pan, who has the sombrero, who has the rope. The kids are all excited about those things. Those things are all our projects and our programs and the brilliant work that happens every day, but no one really cares about the donkey. But we carry on going and we keep playing the game, and everyone piles more and more stuff on the donkey. Donkey has enough, it kicks off. And then we just smack the donkey back into place and hope it will carry on. And at some point, as I keep saying to my children, the donkey is going to break and there will be no more game. And I think as the voluntary sector for funders and partners on the call who are working with those organisations, is that realisation that the donkey actually does need a little bit of love every now and then, and time and capacity to work out what they're doing and where they're going. And do we need more things? Do we need more things to play with, or actually can we just make sure the game is focused and supportive and all those other bits and pieces? I think for us, we've recognised that obviously that it's been quite a journey for us. It's not been easy. Overall, we've made a couple of redundancies. We've had a shift of trustees, but it's been a very a very reflective process for us that's not linear by any shape or form. But I think I could probably hand on heart saying that the organisation we are now is, whilst on the outside looks very similar, and to the outside world probably doesn't look very different, internally even our staff reflect how functionally it's very different, and how we have made those steps to move forward. And it's a journey and it's a process, and I think everyone who is part of that now understands that we don't intend to spend the next 25 years delivering things the way we've always done, that we need to keep evolving and keep changing some of those things. I think my reflections probably would be around the honesty that we've had to have, and I'm very grateful to Berkeley that they took my honesty as intended, but we could be that honest with our funder and also with our partners around the table, because I think, especially in the position of being chief exec, it's a really lonely place to be. You find yourself kind of trying to protect your staff from many worries, not trying to seem incompetent to your trustees, but also you need the time and space and network to have those conversations without people you're also competing for funding from. So it can be a very lonely sort of space. So for me, as part of that process, having those safe spaces to have conversations with people, to realise that you're not alone, and actually these things are difficult and you're not the only one, and actually being able to see either further up, upstream in terms of, what might be coming, and have those, it is a really important space. Berkshire Youth as an organisation has kind of two roles. One is we directly deliver a number of youth services, but also we are an infrastructure organisation for lots of small voluntary organisations that run one night a week, one night a month, really kind of grassroots level organisations. And what we've seen certainly over the last sort of 10 to 15 years is the demise of support for those organisations, kind of broader locally, but also nationally for those organisations. And everyone's kind of looking to us to do those things, but that doesn't come with any support or cash or any of those other things. But actually our moral obligation around supporting those very grassroots groups of volunteers or young people who are running programs is really very important. And I think for us, that next step is about how do we make sure that happens, and how do we make sure the quality remains for those people locally, but also can continue to have conversation with the funders that I don't really need another football session funded this week or another dance group funded. What I need is a member of staff who can then go and support lots of other people, and how important that infrastructure is, not for just remaining provision that we already deliver, but for enabling a wider community of change. I think we are seeing that in our communities. We are seeing communities wanting to take responsibility, but they don't know where to start. They don't know where to go and what to do. And I think we have a duty of care to our communities. We have a duty of care, most certainly, to our young people, to make sure that what they receive is good quality provision, and making sure that we or organisations similar to ourselves can be there for the longevity to make sure that those young people can continue to be supported. I don't think it's a straightforward stuff. These things never are. That they continue to be learning. But I think as an organisation, and I think certainly our cohort certainly found that time and space and the importance of that really important, and for us came at a really, really critical time. So I think if you are an organisation on the call who is in a delivery organisation similar to ourselves, I would absolutely encourage you to try and find that time and space, how important it is. I think if you're a funder, to really look at how you can support organisations to enable those really core things to happen. The game doesn't exist without the donkey. Everyone needs one, but we sometimes get excited by the shiny bits on the outside. So I think if you have the kind of bandwidth within your organisation to enable organisations to do some of this core work, I think it's really vital for the sustainability of the sector. Thanks, Cristina.
Thanks so much, Sarah. You're a very hard act to follow, I'm not gonna lie. I could talk about this all day long, but I'm very conscious of the time we've got left. And Nasia, would you mind putting the Oh, here we go. Oh, excellent. Very good. Thank you. But before we conclude our presentation and open the floor for questions, I mean, I think you can already drop them in the chat if you have them. But we wanted to share a few final reflections with you as to what we as a collective of funders, of organizations, of infrastructure organizations like Berkshire Youth and support providers could do. So in terms of funders, I think I'll just echo Sarah's call. Let's just keep talking about building resilience in the voluntary sector. And I think I saw someone mention unrestricted funding. Yes, let's talk about that as well. We are very keen to hear from organizations that are looking to work in this way, and perhaps even thinking about intervening at different points in the lifeline of a charity. But we are planning to host an event in the summer where we want to explore in more detail some of the meteor questions we have alluded to today, and that will be facilitated by the Social Innovation Exchange, our learning partner. If you're interested, we will follow up with more information in due course. I hope the London funders can help us with that. But if you are keen to be involved or just to have a conversation, just drop me an email. My contact details will be at the end of the presentation. Next, you know, whether or not you support a resilience or capacity building or infrastructure support, I think, and I'm sure Amanda will agree with this on this with me, but there's a host of tools and resources available to organizations in the voluntary sector. If you know of them, please spread the word, please signpost your partners and other organizations to access that additional support. There's free training out there, there's coaching, there's peer groups. Every little helps, I think, in trying to build that culture of resilience. And finally, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the way that we as funders conduct our own business. So, you know, thinking about our due diligence processes, perhaps, or our reporting processes, I'm sure there are ways we can collectively work with our partners to develop that information, those tools, those resources that can support in resilience building and in building that culture for the future. Over to you, Amanda, for your final thoughts.
Yes, thanks, Cristina. I completely agree with everything you said, and I think as funders, you're such an influential community for the organisations that we all support. So I do agree with Cristina that when you're sort of asking for information and reporting, to take as light touch as you can, but also to think about the information you're asking for in applications and in reports, because that's a skills building opportunity for organisations. You know, if you're asking for a particular piece of information, do make sure that it's something that will help the organisation to produce. I'm particularly thinking of cash flow forecasts because that's my great bugbear, but it's really useful if you are asking for that kind of information, because it's very valuable for the organisation to have it. We would want boards and leaders to be thinking about difficult questions, to be making hard plans, and to be preparing for the worst case scenario. I think that even if it doesn't happen, it really does help to think about what that might look like. So not to be too optimistic when planning scenarios. And I think, you know, boards always a plea for trustees to think about what their roles really are and to focus on adding value and supporting leaders. For support providers like us at Cranfield Trust, it's up to us to find ways of providing useful support to organisations without creating big time demands for people. So we're very conscious that we need to be able to add value in ways that are time and cost effective for people. And if they're spending time with us, it needs to be valuable time. So we always welcome a challenge to think about how we can work and how we can improve our service. And if you have any comments for us, I'd be very glad to have them. But I think that's it from Cristina and me, and we're going to go to questions. So if you have any questions, do put them in the chat. And we also have our contact details. Nasia, I think we could go to the contact details just in case anybody would like to follow up with us. I know that London Funders is always really happy to help people to continue conversations, and if there are sort of discussion points that you'd like to follow up, I can see Louise is saying yes to that. So do get in touch either with any of us as individuals or with London Funders who can help to take conversations forward. But I don't know if we have any questions.
Couple of things in the chat, not quite questions, but just nice little shout outs, and thank you, Laura, for that. That's a really interesting set of events, which I've already made a note of. Thank you.
We've stunned everybody into silence.
We've got 5 minutes, so there is space, there is time for questions. Of course, it's one of those things you'll probably walk away and go, I should have asked that. So yeah, please do make a note of people's contact details. And if for whatever reason you lose them, or you know, you didn't manage to catch names or anything like that. But I can see, Tessa, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering if any of you three could talk a little bit more about the challenges around changing culture, and whether there has been, in your experience, an appetite for change, or whether this is really like one of the hardest things to do. And I'm thinking about from board members to staff.
Shall I jump in, Cristina?
Yeah, thank you, Tessa. That's a really great question. And I think one that I wish I had more time to consider a really good answer, but I've got a few things in mind. So first off, you know, we are very happy to have a really involved group of trustees that have been really supportive of this particular approach for us. It is certainly a departure from how we used to provide funding, quite programmatic. So this is a step in the right direction. We also provide unrestricted funding up to 20% of the value of each grant. But this is something that we have been sort of building in the pipeline, and there's been a real great appetite from them to see the progress and I guess the impact this has had on our partners. Similarly, I think you are very right. I think changing culture and shifting that is probably one of the hardest things. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Right at the beginning, when we brought everybody together to spend 4 hours with us in a room talking about resilience, there was a bit of kickback in terms of, you know, we're very busy people. We've got, you know, our organizations depend on us. Bringing us together without giving us some real practical advice on how to build resilience is very hard for us to take time to do. But I think persisting at that and having those conversations constantly as to why this is so important has really, I think, sold our partners on the importance of having that time and space to talk about this and to talk about those, not necessarily with their funders, with us or with the strategic or with our learning partners, but also within their own organizations, with their boards. I mean, some of our partners came back to say, actually, they had never considered resilience before, what it means to them. And for them, it was, you know, perhaps increasing their unrestricted funding or their reserves, but also bringing the people they were working with on a journey. And we're all chipping away at it. Definitely the hardest bit, but we're chipping away at it. I don't know if you have something to say about this, Sarah. I think you've definitely seen this in your work.
Well, I think moving culture is or shifting the culture of an organization for me is a movement as opposed to a sort of a mandated start and stop point. I think the culture of an organization lives in people's hearts and minds, and I think for us, I don't know that I don't know wholesale our culture of the organisation changed. I think the culture around some of our processes and procedures and the way in which we were going to conduct ourselves changed, which I think, she says, optimistically, we navigated successfully through lots of conversations with staff around what is at the heart of what we do, and having everyone kind of buying into our very purpose about who we are and what we do kind of creates an unspoken narrative that kind of then shapes your decisions. And I think if you're collectively around that same central point, for us it was young people being at the heart of what we do and how we enable that to happen, it starts to shape the way, you know, funders that you might apply to. It starts to shape how you might deliver services and other bits and pieces, and being quite clear with people about that journey that you're on, and that everyone's collectively on the same page, and quietly coming back to that with everything. And I think it then starts to kind of shake out those people that maybe don't sit and don't share those cultures and values. I remember on my first day, my chair at the time said to me, "Sarah, have you come for a job or have you come to work? Because if you've come for a job, you won't be here very long," which I thought was quite intimidating at the time. But actually, I think his sentiment was, this isn't a 9 to 5. This isn't turn up. This is who we're about. And if you're part of that process, we can make part of that journey for a very long time, because we have to have that. So I think the culture for me speaks to everything. It speaks to our recruitment. It speaks to how we manage our staff team. It talks to how we kind of make our decisions. But I think it has to come back down to that kind of core vision and mission, and making sure people are aligned on all of those things.
If I can just jump in, Tessa, I just wanted to say that you asked whether you thought people have an appetite for change. And I think there's been so much change over the last few years that people often feel that change has been forced on them, and they're responding to change rather than initiating change themselves. I completely agree with everything Sarah's just said. So I think focusing on culture and taking time for culture is really important. Couldn't be more important. I think Louise is closing us down. So
I'm so sorry, that was the perfect line to end on though, I think. I think we could probably all talk about this all day, and I think that, yeah, that culture eat strategy for breakfast is a pretty good summary, isn't it? I'll give you a moment to connect with each other in the chat if you need to or want to. If anyone wants to kind of drop email addresses in, I won't close the meeting down straight away. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time. I mean, I have to say it was a good session, but it genuinely was a really brilliant session. We sit through a lot of these, and sometimes it's like, well, this was this was genuinely brilliant. I think the engagement at the end, I think, really shows that this is something that is very much kind of at the heart of the work that everybody is doing. This is a really, really important conversation that we'll probably just scratch the surface of, to be honest. But I really, really appreciate everyone taking the time. Hopefully see you at some more sessions, and take really good care.
Excellent. Thanks, Louise. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Written down everything. What a great comment.
Must be exhausted.
Also furiously written a lot of notes as well. But thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you, Louise and Nazia.
Thank you. Do you need
Thanks,
anything from us before we go?
No, nothing. It's been really
All right.
great. And
Thank
yeah,
you
I'm
so
sure
much,
we can.
Sarah.
That's okay. More than welcome.
Sarah, as somebody who's worked in delivery organisations, I was like nodding furiously along to everything.
I can attest, she absolutely was. So thank you all so much. It was such an insightful meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nazia, for keeping us so well organised. That was
Oh,
great.
no worries. Do you know what? Because it's on a PDF and not on a PowerPoint, I can't click. I have to scroll. So every single time I jump ahead, I was like, oh no, this is so sensitive. I hope I'm throwing them completely off their game, but you guys did amazingly well.
Yes.
No, well, you were brilliant. So thank you very much indeed. And Cristina and Sarah, lovely working with you, and we'll be in touch again, I hope.
Likewise, Amanda. All right. Have a
Okay.
good afternoon, everyone.
All right.
Thanks all.
Thank
See
you.
you
Bye,
soon.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.